I just want to say thank you to everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. I know there's a lot going on this week. My name is Maria Piccone. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Trend Community. We're a digital health analytics company with a bold vision to revolutionize the world's understanding of diseases. I want to give a special thanks to Horizon Therapeutics for sponsoring this event, and to my colleagues, Lauren and Anjani, somewhere here, and actually Jessica, also our community ambassador, who've been working very hard behind the scenes to make this happen. My husband Chris and I, we started Trend Community after our daughter was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder called Prader-Willi syndrome. After about 3 months of scouring through the literature, I joined an online support group for caregivers of children with PWS. And I was immediately struck by this glaring gap between what I'd read about the disease in the medical literature and what appeared to be possible for a child born today with this rare genetic disorder. And so Chris and I, we decided to use our knowledge of data analytics to start to systematically collect the anecdotes from our community so that we could understand how to manage this disease to ensure that our daughter would have the best possible health outcomes. Trend Community harnesses machine learning and natural language processing techniques to capture the perspective and experiences of patients, caregivers, and care partners as we share our stories in those trusted online communities like the one that I joined when my daughter was born. And over the last 5 years, we've analyzed real-world conversations from hundreds of rare and chronic disease communities, and every single time, mental health bubbles up as an important topic of conversation. And so earlier this year, with a generous sponsorship from Chiesi Global Rare Diseases, Alexion Charitable Foundation, and of course Horizon Therapeutics, we launched the Mental Health Real-World Evidence Accelerator. So Trend's Evidence Accelerators, as we call them, they bring together our sponsors, key opinion leaders, and of course those online support groups to turn the community's conversations into real-world data that drive the advancement of clinical care, research, and medical product development. This work aims to amplify the voices of entire communities because we believe that every voice is valuable to positive change. And although we talk a lot about the data, we can't forget that there are real people that are living with unimaginable suffering, uncertainty, and daily challenges as they navigate life living with a medical diagnosis. So today, we're going to share our early insights on rheumatic diseases and hear from community experts to emphasize the importance of treating the whole patient and why mental health matters in this equation. So next, I want to invite to the stage Josie Cooper, Dr. Christopher Parker, and Gary Ho from the Gout Support Group of America. Together with the Alliance for Gout Awareness, Global Healthy Living Foundation, and Horizon Therapeutics, Trend Community and the Gout Support Group of America launched a Gout Real-World Evidence Accelerator that focused on patient mental health outcomes and the management of gout. Josie Cooper, a friend of the Gout Support Group of America, will be moderating today's keynote program. Josie has worked with GSGA for many years and works in stakeholder and clinician mobilization, developing policy and educational strategies to improve the patient access to care. She also has a background in communications, research, grassroots organization, and campaign politics. Patient advocate Gary Ho and rheumatologist Dr. Christopher Parker are co-founders of the Gout Support Group of America, founded in 2015. Together, they serve an online community of those living with gout. The support group works to improve the lives of people living with gout through wellness education, empowerment, and support from peers. Members of the group can ask questions, share their experiences, and seek advice from other people who understand what it's like to live with gout.
Hi, everyone. Josie Cooper, as Maria said, very much appreciate your time today. Appreciate our speakers here for sharing their expertise. We are very excited to be here for a conversation about gout and mental health, a topic that I know is near and dear to both Gary and Dr. Parker. The Gout Support Group of America has done tremendous work since it was launched in 2015 to support patients, both in their physical and mental health journeys. And so I know we've got a lot of insights to share here. And before we go any further, just want to say thank you to the Trend team for the opportunity and allowing us to be a part of this on behalf of GSGA. So, Dr. Parker, I think we can just get into it. I'd like to start just with a level set from you, perhaps. Can you just talk a little bit about what gout is for folks who may be
I'm not
less
actually sure
familiar?
this. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. I was going to start also by saying I see all these doctor forefathers, and I don't look very smart, so I thought if I hold the book like some of them, maybe it'll, okay, maybe you know something. So what's gout? I get asked this question all the time. And so I like to ground people by saying, listen, gout is just an accumulation of a normal waste product, normal. All of God's creatures make uric acid, but some of his creatures, humans and a couple others, not that you need to know this for like a cocktail party, but if you do, it comes Dalmatians, turkeys, a couple apes. They don't have this particular enzyme that breaks this stuff down. And this uric acid in some people can accumulate in the soft tissues, in and around joints, or in other organs of the body, causing all kinds of suffering.
Thanks so much. And Gary, do you want to talk a little bit about your, experience with gout? Let's just start there.
I'm Gary. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to share a little bit about my experience and my journey. Basically, I am a gout patient. I have lived with gout for 28 years, and 16 out of the 28 years was me trying to receive a diagnosis. So I lived 16 years with unmanaged gout, and we'll get more into that later. But my journey from my first flare to finding the right doctor, receiving a diagnosis, and then being treated for gout to where I was able to manage gout was a pretty emotional journey for me. And, I consider myself one of the lucky ones because I was able to meet the right doctor. I was able to find hope and turn my life around. So, and this hope that I'm talking about needs to be shared to people out there. There's 9 million people with gout. And you guys, this is why we're here, and this is why we're doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gary. I wonder if you can just talk us through, where your story started, so sort of the days before gout.
Sure. So that's a picture of me in the early 90s. It's probably, we're talking about 1990, 91, so I'm dating myself. So you can see I'm happy. I'm a wide-eyed, positive, confident. I'm going to take life by the horn and, really active, very into martial arts, the whole gamut. And you can see, I'm rocking the mullet. I got the business in the front and the party in the back. But that's my pre-gout days. That's basically when I was maybe 20, 21, right around that time. Let's go to the next picture. So this is me when I am struggling to manage gout. So in 1994, that is when I felt my first gout attack. When I felt my first attack, I remember walking across campus, and I was just walking, and my ankle started hurting. I mean, it started throbbing, and it did not get better. That night, it swelled up, it turned red. And I was telling my dad, this is really strange, Dad. This is what's going on with my ankle. He says, Gary, you might have gout. I have gout. You might have gout. You need to go to a doctor, and you need to tell him that it could run in the family. So mind you, this is around 94. I go see a doctor, and I remember sitting in his office, and I told him, Doc, my ankle is hurting. It feels like it's broken, honestly, and I don't know what I did. I need to tell you, though, I think I have gout in my family, and I might have gout. And I remember him looking at me and saying, young man, there's no way you have gout. You must have tripped, or you're walking too hard. Too hard? Okay. Yes. You don't have gout. And honestly, at that time, when I heard the doctor say, I don't have gout, you know what I did? I'm like, yes, I don't have gout, you know? And I went on with my business. I went on my life. And as you know, when you live with gout, even when a flare comes, if you do nothing, sooner or later the pain will go away. It will go away, but it comes back, right? And each time it comes back, it gets worse and worse, and it's called a progressive disease. And I want you to take a look at the pictures behind me. That is me basically trying to manage this condition for 16 years. So in the beginning, the attacks would come, and it would last maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, you know, and it would go away. And each time it would come, the pain was excruciating. I remember thinking, what the hell is this? And when is it going to end? I would lay in bed at night, and this is just, you know, examples, memories. I would lay in bed, and it's hot, whatever area, either, you know, if it's my toe, it's red, it's swollen, it's throbbing. If it's my knee, it's the same thing. It's hot. I remember having the fan on in my bedroom, and as the gentle breeze comes down, as it flows over that affected area, it causes pain. You can feel it. When you're pulling a sheet over, because you might get now chilly with the fan going, you pull a sheet over, you can actually feel the sheet as it glides over the affected area, causing tremendous pain. So this is basically 16 years of trying to get diagnosed. And as the attacks would come on, I would visit a doctor, and again, I would be rebuffed, and, you know, they're either, it's probably your diet, you're probably eating too much, you're drinking too much. You know, the ownership of this pain and disease was always on the patient, and there was never a solution. So I started to try to figure a way to manage my pain. So now I'm trying to reactively manage gout. The only thing that I could do really is to, you know, listen to the wives' tales out there, drink a lot of cherry juice, eat cherries, eat yams, stay away from meat, eat your rice, drink tons of water, you know, and all these things, but nothing worked. As the attacks would come, it would become worse and worse. And these attacks now would last, on average, about maybe 3 to 4 weeks at a time, and it would come at the end of my journey. It was coming maybe 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 times a year. Excruciating pain. And you can see from my face there, how do you think I'm managing the pain? When I would go to a doctor, they were not able to give me a diagnosis, and so the only thing that we could do is treat the pain like a Band-Aid. So they would prescribe maybe steroids, you know, maybe some naproxen. I was using a lot of naproxen, a lot of steroids, and you can see just on my face the puffiness from, I think, years of steroid use. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. So 1994 is when I felt my first attack. 2010 is when I hit rock bottom. At this point, when I was going through my wilderness experience, mentally, I had shut down. I went from a wide-eyed, positive person to a person that was dealing with depression, anxiety, a sense of hopelessness, because I didn't know when this pain would end or if it would ever end. And in 2010, I remember thinking, that's it? I'm on crutches. I'm using wheelchairs at a time. I can't do the things I love to do, you know, and I feel like I feel like I want to quit. And I thought, well, you know, if what you're doing is not working, maybe do something different. And I went on, as any one of you would probably do, we go on Google nowadays to look something up. And I looked up gout, you know, and who specializes in gout, and I found out, hey, it's a rheumatologist. So I looked up rheumatologist nearest me. You know, that was how in depth I went. And I was living in Austin, and Google connected me with Chris Parker. And I feel so lucky and humble to have been able to meet him. In 2010, I hobbled into his office, and I sat down, and he says, hey, what's going on? I said, hey, I got a story for you, you know. Let me tell you my journey. And surprisingly, he listened without any pushback. He gave me the time of day. I felt that he really gave me empathy that I needed. And then the most amazing thing was that he offered me hope. He said, Gary, gout, it's not curable, but you can actually live a pain-free life and regain your quality of life. And I was amazed to hear that story. So I know our time is short. I'm just going to say this. My condition was pretty bad. At the time, there was a new medication that was being worked on. I think they were in a stage 2 of clinical trials, Crystexxa. It's an infusion medication for patients that have chronic gout that are really, really bad. It's basically your last hope to get your life back in order. And the medication was in this experimental stage, and Chris says, Gary, you might want to think about this. I'm like, yeah, tell me more about this. So I was lucky enough to participate in that trial run. And it was 9 months of treatment, 2 times a month, 6 hours per treatment. Think about that. And, you know, it really changed my life. You can see, picture number 1 is really when I met Chris right there. That is my face. I've had it. This is a man that's lived in pain for 16 years. Just to put it in perspective, I was 24 years old when I first experienced my gout. 16 years, basically my later 20s and all of my 30s were gone. And then I woke up 40, and there I am, without hope. I mean, I lost a significant portion of my life. That picture in the upper corner is with the infusion treatment that I went through. And, you know, this is me up there maybe a year later, that now my uric acid level is low. I'm able to maintain my low uric acid. My body starts to repair itself. I'm gaining energy, confidence, and I'm back to my old self. 16 years later, less hair, no mullet, but same person. And you guys, peace. Now I have peace of mind. I'm no longer anxious. I'm no longer dealing with mental anxiety that plagued my life for over a decade. Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. It really is an incredible story, and your journey has just been so challenging, and you've really persevered. I wonder, Dr. Parker, if you can talk about whether this is a unique story.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to echo what you said, Josie, because when I think about being a man, in the United States at least, and a martial artist, and there's a bit of a warrior mentality, to put that out there for people to chew on and say, oh, I had depression, I had anxiety, I'm having, no hope. It's not easy in our culture. So again, thank you for sharing that so we can really try to understand. I wish this was an unusual, difficult case. This is an everyday thing for me, right? It's an everyday thing for me. I realize perhaps you could say, well, there's some referral bias, you're a subspecialist, and when I did academic medicine, it takes so long to get back there. And I go, no. It doesn't matter if you're in the community or academic medicine. People don't get diagnosed for the longest time. If you're a female, it's even harder, right? Because like, oh, women don't get that. That's totally false, of course. And so I wish that was an uncommon phenomenon, but it's actually very common.
We actually pulled a handful of comments from the Facebook group directly about that. Gary, you spoke about not feeling heard. I think that's unfortunately far too common. I don't know if either of you wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think that these really echo that. When we did this survey and had people share, it wasn't like, oh, it was a big city and I couldn't get in, or remote area and I couldn't get in. I mean, this is the state of affairs everywhere. So that's the nature. And it's not all because doctors are horrible, and it's not all because there's financial limitations. It's not all because, all the things that happen. It's just the world that we live in.
So we've included here some stats from both the trend data as well as a recent Alliance for Gout Awareness survey on mental health and gout, and really putting numbers to the anecdotes. Gary, you have been leading this Facebook group for a long time. Does this track? Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, this data up here is pretty amazing. So thank you to Trend, and thank you to the Alliance for Gout Awareness for doing this. We basically see, anxiety at 17%, depression at 22%, stress at 37%, and really, these are coming from patients that they're not able to find a diagnosis, and they're treating gout, what I call reactively treating gout, bandaging putting a Band-Aid on their disease, and look at this. This is pretty amazing. If you read down this, the percentage of gout affecting people, 41% of gout patients, it affects their job. 30% of gout patients, it affects their ability to care for their children, spouse, family members. 50% are affected in their ability to participate in hobbies and community activities. I couldn't do martial arts anymore during that time. I had stopped. I mean, my ability to be active was done. I was done. Barely able to get in and out of a car, you guys. It's insane. 28% are having difficulties maintaining friendships and staying socially active. And then 56% affects their ability to enjoy their life. And I think one of the biggest things is this portion right here. So we saw that with gout patients, those that are not able to proactively manage their gout, there's a whopping 80 or 58% of patients it affects their mental health in a negative way. Right. I mean, and that, I always knew there was a connection there as a patient, but it is so refreshing to see that as we dive into it scientifically and look at the data, that it backs everything up. It backs what my experience has been, and it backs up the experiences of our patients and our members out there.
Absolutely. It really makes it clear the full impact on patients. Dr. Parker, anything that stands out to you here? How do you see these issues
as a gout researcher myself and a scientist, when I tried to decide when the Gout Support Group of America and on Facebook and they describe things, it's not like we were asking, do you have depression, do you have anxiety, do you have this or that or anything. So they're just describing their story. And so it makes you go, I don't know if they really have depression or anxiety. I mean, maybe they're having a bad day. I don't really know. But when the data is basically reproducible, if I actually formally get it from you and say, well, do you have this, or are you being treated for depression or anxiety or whatever, and you go, well, that's that data. And you kind of go, they just match up. This is every bit reproducible like any scientific study should be. So that's what kind of jumps out at me.
Yeah.
Sure. I know another part of what Trend looked at with GSGA was some of these stigma words. We've looked at stigma through the Alliance for Gout Awareness. Can you talk about what you see around stigma?
Yeah. So stigma is a problem for a variety of reasons, but I think one that's particular to gout is the age of the illness. So Hippocrates, the father of medicine, 1800 years ago, he knew about gout. He didn't know it was uric acid, But it was an evil humor back then. But the long and short of it is like, well, you have to decrease your alcohol intake, or again, they had to do dietary maneuvers as best they could. They were trying to understand some pieces of the puzzle, and so, unfortunately, as that gets carried through hundreds, more than 1,000 years, if somebody says, "Oh, I have gout," "Oh, you're a drinker? I didn't know that." Boozer, probably. I don't know. Guys, I joke a little bit. I just have some. It's okay to laugh. It's okay. I'm just joking. Okay, we're just having fun. Okay. But the little voices in our head, when you're the outside looking in, they're still talking to you. So then he's less likely to share it. "Oh, I didn't know you were a drinker." "I don't drink." "Oh, I'm sure you don't." Okay, that kind of thing. And so, and then if I tell a lady, "Oh, this is gout," how could I have gout? I thought that was like an old man thing, right? And because all the stigma that you think of with gout historically just gets drugged right along, right? So I was talking with Ben Franklin today. He's actually at the meeting.
Right.
And, we're talking about this stuff. Everybody knows this womanizer and a boozer and all this stuff. And you go, "Well, that's my view of gout." Right? So this is carrying it along. It's part of the weight, if you will, of the condition. And then maybe now you don't want to get treatment or express it to your family or your boss.
You're
right?
embarrassed, yeah.
Thank you. Embarrassment. So that's what I think this stuff brings to bear. And thanks for giving me a chance to talk about it.
Sure. Well, and one thing we've talked a lot about is you're sort of dealing with this double stigma as you address the mental health components here. We see so much stigma around gout already.
Yeah.
We know that there is a significant stigma around mental health issues and conditions. How do you see that play out in the Facebook group, Gary, when people are kind of dealing with both of those things simultaneously?
Man, yeah. Gout sufferers, we really won the lottery, didn't we? We get stigma for having the condition. And people look at gout patients as you brought it on to yourself with your inability to control your lifestyle. And this is general, I would say. Some physicians are good. They know and they understand, and they show empathy, they show compassion, they show understanding. That's great. But for the majority of gout sufferers, dealing even with our family members, they don't know gout. Our friends, you know what my nickname was with my friends? They called me Gimpy or Gout Boy. That was my nickname through the 16 years of journey with unmanaged gout. And then I think about the mental anguish that I went through. As an Asian, I'll tell you this, mental illness as an Asian, we don't embrace that as a community. We see it as weakness, as something wrong with you. And so we're not wanting to talk much about that. And I'm sure with the Asian community, it's not very different from other communities out there. I mean, the last thing you want to do is sit down with somebody while watching football and go, "Hey, man, I need to talk with you about my gout. I want to tell you how I feel." I remember one time I said, "Hey," to a good friend of mine, I said, "Hey, I have gout." You know what he said? "Ew." He said, "Ew." And that's because there's lack of understanding, lack of compassion. I can get more compassion from people saying I have a lower back pain or I have a migraine than I will when I say I have a full-blown gout attack and I can't go to work. They think I'm lying, And
Good analogy.
yeah, so the stigma is real, and I think, one of the things that the Gout Support Group of America does so well is that we provide a space that is safe, and we bring a taboo topic that no one wants to talk about into the open. So now it's safe to talk about gout. It's safe to share about your anxiety, your pains, your struggles, and it's a place to find strength, comfort. It's a place to find resources. It's a place to find, just hope in that living with gout pain-free and reclaiming your quality of life is doable, it's possible, and it's yours if you will just embrace the process.
Absolutely. And it's clear that the resources, the programming that GSGA is doing has made a difference. You can see some of the comments that folks have left in the Facebook group. I'm sure there are many, many more. But, it's that support, that feeling heard that is so important for patients.
Yes.
I mean, we all sleep better at night knowing that this happens in the English-speaking world, because it's not just the U.S., actually. Facebook's everywhere. So it's so great to get these reports,
Absolutely. So one thing we talk about quite a bit with gout is the misinformation that's out there too. The questions that folks have, the kind of old wives' tales that exist around this disease. Can you talk a little bit about how that impacts mental health?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot going on there and a lot to unpack, and I don't know that I understand it all. But when it comes to mental health, as Gary mentioned, there's all this overlay of just the society and the culture. And I think when it's a comorbid problem, sometimes it can be hard to prioritize what I got to fix first. I always wonder, gout patients are classically you could walk down the ACR halls, and I say, what do you think of with gout? And they'll say, oh, not compliant. Boom, immediately. That's what they come up with, right? Now, why is that, though? Why? Is it that we're giving bad information? Or is there so much anxiety and depression and stuff like this? They're just off the rails. They're not making their follow-up appointments and stuff like that. There's a lot going on, I think, that get people to just go, oh, they're poorly compliant patients, and that's why they have their troubles. Again, it's always on you. This is you. You did this. It's a lifestyle thing, and then you don't come to your appointments, and then you don't take your medicines, and then you're back, right? So I think that's what I wanted to share. And then the other thing that the information age hurts us for sure, is, it's the information age, misinformation, right? Because you don't have to be knowledgeable, right? You have to be knowledgeable and say, oh, here you go, here's your lime juice strategy right there. And we've seen it all. Oh, you need preparation H on the joint, or wherever you put that, I don't know. But the long and short of it is they come up with stuff, right? And so, it's everywhere, it's ubiquitous, right? And so for us, when we're at doing our Gout Support for America, we don't want to not be a soft place to land. You want to do cherry juice, that's all fine. That's fine. But we also want to be the voice of reason and science. But how can you become like Gary and have a new life, right? So that's the other thing that we're trying to dispel, because the world is riddled with misinformation here.
Absolutely. Gary, do you want to talk about what it has meant to the members, to the patients that you work with, to have that source, to have GSGA as a source of reliable information on gout?
Again, it's providing that safe place for people to come and honestly get information and resources and educational pieces that we put together that they hopefully know that it's scientifically based. I said this to Josie and Chris earlier, and I'm going to say it again. There's never been a better time to have gout than in the time that we live today, okay? If you're going to have gout at any other time, make sure it's in our century and today, because we have more tools in our toolbox to deal with gout, and we can effectively manage this disease if we do certain things, if we understand how gout works. How does gout work? Basically, in a nutshell, high uric acid over time, uncontrolled, turns into jabbing crystals. These crystals that look like little needles. What does it feel like? Well, picture 1,000 little men inside your knee jabbing their way out. That's one way of describing gout pains. And I'm not surprised with, the misinformation out there, because you know what people are looking for? They're looking for hope, and they're looking for just an answer. If they're not getting it from their doctor, they're going to get it from their wife, their whatever, wherever they can get it. My mom was big on cherries. She bought me huge packages of, it had to be dark, red cherries. And if they're dry, even better, because they were concentrated. And I remember going to Chris and saying, hey, Chris, I'm eating cherries. He never knocked me. He just basically said, hey, Gary, let's go off of the data. okay? So if you're eating cherries, we're still gonna take a blood test on you. We're gonna see where your uric acid is. If it's high, we're gonna add to that. If we think it's good just on cherries, fine. You know, what happens? 99% of the time, you know, as people are only trying to manage their gout through dietary, you know, just through diets, you know, what we found out is that the maximum that UA level can move up or down through diet alone is, and Chris, you can back me up, you know, if it's true, it's about 1, you know, 1 or 2, up or down. So if you're living 10 years with your uric acid level at 9 or 10 like I did, do you think eating cherries would get it low enough, and it has to be below 6 in order for the body to get rid of all the uric crystals that have been building up through the years? The scientific answer is no.
But Mama says you better.
And, you know, I love my mom. I'm going to eat my cherries, but I'm going to go beyond that, and I'm going to listen to my rheumatologist, too, right? And that's what our group provides, you know.
Yeah.
We tackle the misinformation, but we add by adding real
Science.
Yeah, scientific data.
And science.
And we tell them to act on the data. So that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, and you're getting that information directly to, you know, 15,000 people
Right.
directly through the group, which is amazing.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So I want to go back to GSGA's partnership with Trend on social media insights into patients' mental health outcomes in gout management. So Trend sourced information from your support group as well as from the gout Reddit page and analyzed about 9,000 posts and about 114,000 comments from 2011 until 2022 to really take a look at, you know, what mental health conditions, issues folks were dealing with as it related to their journeys with gout. We've put up just a handful of slides, of posts from the Facebook group of folks talking about mental health. You know, how are people talking about mental health in the Facebook group?
On you, Gary.
Okay, so what I've seen is that, you know, when a person comes to our support page, it depends on where they're at their journey. It could be that they're experiencing their first attack, and so I'm like, ooh, you're just starting your journey, okay? So here, we're gonna throw you some information. Then we have people that are in their mid-40s, 50s, you know, that probably have been stubborn for a while, you know, and they've had their attacks here and there, but they're wanting to man through, and they don't want to be known as a pill popper, but yet when the attacks come, they'll take whatever it is over the counter to take care of the pain, right? And we see that, and we see the frustration, and we see the mental anguish from people that are not able to, you know, manage their gout, and especially when the attacks are lasting 5 weeks at a time. You look at Margaret, well, basically she says, I'm going on 5 weeks, and it's affecting my mental health. You see Shelley up here, she is facing a mental breakdown because, you know, I think it's her thumb will not stop throbbing, and she actually imagines cutting her thumb off so that the pain goes away. I hear that a lot. You know, we talk about just the little things, not being able to sleep properly at night. I became an insomniac, you know, through 16 years of gout. I couldn't sleep. It affects you mentally when you cannot sleep. And one of the most powerful examples I can give you is Tommy. I'm glad we're using this example. Tommy is a part of our group. He is, I believe, 22 years old right now, but he had his first gout attack at age 16. He's undiagnosed. Tommy was amputated on at age 22, so a part of his toe was taken away because of uncontrolled gout. Tommy says, hey guys, how do I deal with the emotions that come along with gout? He's 22 years old, he's asking that question. He's still not diagnosed. I think just a few weeks ago, he had his first appointment with a rheumatologist. I'm dying to find out the update on him. These are examples of real life people going through life with gout and they're begging for an answer. They're begging for someone to hear them and offer them something. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gary. And so looking at the data, to the point that was made earlier, it's not just a data point, it's a person. And we're seeing a lot of trends here as it relates to mental health. Dr. Parker, what stands out to you as a physician about the data?
Let me just give you the 10,000 feet up, what this data is saying, because this was really profound and massive to me. I know that if you have a chronic painful illness, that it's going to affect mental health. I know that. My rheumatoid arthritis patients, my lupus patients, my scleroderma, my Sjogren's, my everybody. Of course, this is a very important part of the whole structure, right? I got that. But what was so powerful, and I'm going to just give it to you in a nutshell, and read the paper if you want, but the people that were on their journey and getting their care like out of urgent cares or ERs or whatever, they were never getting proactive therapy to get on their uric acid lowering therapy. They're just bouncing in and out, getting some steroids, getting some Motrin, getting some colchicine or whatever. They had way more troubles with mental health, whether it's depression or anxiety or some combination thereof. But if you can get people, give them some hope and that you can get out of this. Proactive therapy, get your uric acid down, melt these crystals away. Man, you were way less likely to suffer that comorbid problem. And so, to me, it was profound. It was like, well, I wish I'd known that a long time ago to share it with everybody. So, I'm going to be calm for a minute and try to just relax. But I can get hyped up over this because it's really powerful.
I just want to add, this slide is really powerful. It's pretty awesome. We're able to, from this year, this data was just harnessed this year. For me, as a gout patient, I see a clear connection between reactively managing gout and high stress. Low trust, high anxiety. I see a connection between when someone is proactively treating gout, I see the trust level goes up. I see.
So it's this baby right here, right? So here's your trust level. You can see if you're on the allopurinol side, right?
Yeah.
I got this. So proactive actually is purple, right? So you have higher trust with your doctor or your medical team or whatever. So this word is used when, look at that allopurinol. Look at that massive difference. You're on allopurinol, you're going down a good road. You're bouncing in and out of ERs and getting steroids, you're on a bad road, right? And so that's how I think you put these things together.
You got it, Chris. And this is huge. It's huge. You look at, proactively managing gout, the steroid use is like a lot lower. You see allopurinol is used effectively when you're proactively managing gout. It's higher. So I think this data right here is amazing. If you're in healthcare, if you're dealing with gout patients, you need to soak this in because you can use this information and tangibly move forward in how you can work with your patients and how to care for gout. It's important.
That's it.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's a lot that can be done with this data, whether you're a clinician or a patient advocate or a researcher.
Or a patient.
Yep.
That's the thing. You're a patient, and you kind of go, maybe I have to do that allo something, right? That allopurinol something, right? So because every level can get something from this, right? And if I can expand more, I'll do it now.
Sure.
So the thing that's so powerful to me on the medical side is if we let people, the medical community, let people continue reactive medicine, other systems, not their gout, other systems are coming off the rails. They're coming off the rails. And then that dominoes to the next thing. And then they don't make their appointments. And then they don't, right? So to me, it's a massive call to action that the trend was able to really quantify, to say like, hey, you could do something with this, easy. It's a call to action, right? So it's massively powerful. When Gary and I saw this, and it was presented as a virtual poster yesterday, we're like, boy, I hope this gets some traction.
Yes.
But, maybe there's a bunch of people out there right now, I don't know. Again, it was another joke, guys. It's a joke. It's a joke. We're just having fun. But it would be cool if this was like Rockstar City. We'll walk out and they go, yes! Because this is important.
Absolutely. And I know we're low on time, but, you know, I always like to ask you guys when we do things like this, you know, what's the one takeaway?
With this.
Yeah, what's the one thing you want to leave folks
You
with?
go.
Okay, the one takeaway. Look, how many of you guys know somebody that lived with gout? Right? Okay. And then most of the people in this room basically are in the healthcare profession. So I know that you want to better lives. You want to make a difference with people, you know. And so I would say that with this data, we have a lot of work to do. There are 9 million people living with gout. I don't know what percentage, probably a high percentage of them they're unmanaged, right? But 9 million of us live with gout. And we've seen it through our support page. The need is major. And what I would impress on those that are a professional medical in that field, I want to impress on you to spend a little bit more time with your patients. Ask the questions, listen to their response, and show empathy, and you will make a difference in their life. I guarantee you. So it's a call to action from me. Thank you.
Yep. That's it. That's it. I mean, I see the same thing from the medical side. It's a call to action. And patients are reluctant. And so to use a little bit of philosophy, if you want to write a little quote down, this is a good one. The only way out is through. The only way out is through.
Yes.
So we're going to do a proactive approach, and we're going to get the hell out of here.
Right.
Boom, the hope comes on. And if I do a really good job, they say, you know, doc, I feel better already. You haven't even started medicine yet. Because I want it, poof, have that light come on. It's still going to be bumpy. The only way out is through. We're going to have to get through this, but you can get there.
That's right.
It's all about hope. And so this quantifies that that's real. That's real. It makes a difference. There are people that wouldn't get there without it. So thank you, Trend, for
Thank
sure.
you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think we have just a couple of minutes for questions, if anyone has them in the audience.
I was going to do my
I think there's
Forrest
a-
Gump.
I think
I
there's
was
a
going
mic
to say,
gonna run
that's
around.
all I have to say about that. But
Hi, thank you so much for sharing that. That was really inspiring. My name is Betsy, and my question is, what percentage of your support group consists of healthcare providers?
Great question. Our support group is a private support group found on Facebook, and we did that on purpose. At the beginning, we had it open, but then we had a feedback from one of our members saying that this condition is so severe, and I'm so embarrassed to even talk about it. I don't want it to be in an open forum. And I thought, that's a valid point. And so immediately we switched over and we made it private. In order for someone to come and be a part of our group, you're going to need to answer 3 questions. They're not, you know, math questions or, you know, a SAT test you need to take. It's just basically questions about your journey, where you're at, and we try to identify if you are a patient or if you know somebody that has gout and you're a loved one trying to take care of them, wives,
Loved
you know,
one,
for
caregiver.
caregiver.
Yeah.
All right, those are the only people really that we allow in the group. And we keep it that way because we want to make sure we protect our group from shysters. you know,
charlatans, snake oil
charlatans.
salesmen, all that.
We don't want conversations to be stolen and steered into a direction of misinformation. So we're very protective of our group. So at this point, we have 14,500 members, and they're basically patients or caregivers of people that are suffering from gout.
But I don't want you to think there's none, because like I'm a healthcare provider, I'm on there,
Yes,
and there are
there's
a
a few.
few.
There's a few.
You know, so of the 14,005, I mean, we're talking about, you know, half a dozen maybe?
Yeah,
It's
and I
not a
would
lot
say
of-
they need to have purpose. You know, there has to be a reason why they're a part of the group.
Right.
And we would look at that.
That because I think the data are really important for HCPs to be aware of.
You're right.
That they, in their management of, their patients and, to be sort of the best support for their patients.
You're right.
You are so right. And it's, we want as many folks to kind of lead that crusade as possible. So, we're always looking for help. And when I say to other doctors, like, why don't you join us, volunteer, all this kind of stuff we do on a Saturday, coming over, let's talk to some gout patients. They're like, no, I'm not coming. I got plans this Saturday.
Saturday.
All right, okay, not, But there are some people that really want to make a difference. And you're right, it's when it falls on the right ears, it can be implemented easy.
Yes.
So thanks for bringing that forward.
Absolutely.
Other questions? I don't want to take.
I think we might be out of time, but
Okay.
I will add, beyond the group on Facebook, the Gout Support Group of America does have a website, a newsletter. Go to goutsupportgroup.org to find more information, to sign up for that newsletter.
Yeah, join that, see what we're up to.
Thank you, Gary,
thank you,
Dr.
Josie.
Parker. What a fantastic keynote.
Thank you, Josie, Gary, Dr. Parker. Heard different versions of this story, and every time it leaves an impression on me. Also, thank you, Betsy, for pointing that out. I mean, essentially, that's why we're doing this work, because we can turn the conversations into data that we can actually publish. And as Dr. Parker mentioned, we presented this at the conference. It is a poster if you have the app. If not, please follow up with someone from Trend. We're happy to mail this to you. And the team is currently working on a manuscript, and we hope to publish this in a peer-reviewed journal so that we can reach more rheumatologists and other healthcare providers. So now I want to introduce my husband, co-founder, and our CTO, and move into a more technology-focused section.
Thank you to my wife for introducing me. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on a Sunday. I appreciate it, you coming out. Thank you to Horizon Therapeutics for putting on the event, helping us put on this event. Thank you to our speakers, the ones we just had and the ones we're about to have. Also, just want to give a big shout out to our Trend team. There's a lot of people here that put on a lot of work to go by here. And my technology team, who are the ones that are driving a lot of data, and they work really hard to make sure the insights that are coming through are reproducible, are following the scientific process. This way we have confidence in what we're seeing. So my wife said, I need you to talk about a very confusing topic and you get no slides. So I'm going to do my best to keep it simple. But yeah, so our artificial intelligence approach into how we go about capturing the community voice. It's always tricky when people say AI, because it's kind of like similar to like, oh, we hear it a lot, right? We use artificial intelligence to do something. It's kind of like asking somebody, what do you do for work? I'm a consultant. It's like, great, okay, and we consult on what? I'm not as good as the joke with you, Dr. Parker, I'm sorry, I'm trying. Yeah, artificial intelligence encompasses a lot of different disciplines and subfields, and they can overlap. The common ones are machine learning, everyone hears about that. We have deep learning, reinforcement learning, linguistics, statistics, math, computer science, natural language understanding, natural language processing. There's a whole bunch. Maria elaborated on it earlier. We're in the area of natural language processing, right? So we're using natural language processing to drive this approach of understanding the community voice. And that intersects a couple of different other fields, right? We have linguistics, plays a huge role in it, right? We have linguistics on our staff, computational linguistics. Computer science, there's a lot of computer science and just software engineering into making sure the data is coming in. It's secure, it's properly cleansed just for analysis. And there's statistics involved, as you saw on some of the slides, right? We're trying to have some statistical rigor to our insights. So there's a lot of different things that go into it, overlaps with those fields. Our goal with it is ultimately, and a goal with something like this is, can we teach a computer or help a computer process to understand natural language in order to just perform a task, right? Perform some type of task that's going to be beneficial to us, to the end user. And some examples of that I think will resonate with everybody here is take digital assistants, right? Well, I might set off some phones, so you might want to just cover it, right? So, hey Siri, right? Our Siris, our Alexas, our Googles, right? That's all powered by natural language processing, right? Chatbots, when you go to that site, that annoying little circle on the bottom that's just like, hey, how can I help you? And you're like, just leave me alone, just go off. How do you go away? Natural language processing. And I'm sure all of us today at some point searched online, right? We went into our search input, typed that in there, natural language processing at it. So there's a lot of natural language processing happening, right? We're using it to perform a task that's beneficial to us, and that's what we're trying to do in capturing this voice. So why is it now? Why is it that we use it? How is it that Trend's able to use this technology? So I just gave a lot of illustrations on like big technology giants that are able to leverage this. Well, there's a couple things that kind of allowed like my wife and I to get in this field. And that's one is just the proliferation of social media, right? When social media, this century, you now have online communities that are forming and coming together and speaking. You have rare disease groups, we have chronic disease groups, we have the Gout Support Group of America. And that's data. That's all being captured and it's stored as data, right? Now we just have tremendous amount of data to run these types of technologies. It's not that machine learning hasn't existed. It's existed for decades, It's just now we have a lot of data to really leverage it, right? And then combine that with cloud computing, we have cost-effective compute power to process the massive amount of data that we are able to go and glean some of the insights that you've seen today so far, and we'll see momentarily. And that allows someone like Trend Community, who, 20-person company, we're not generating the, billion-dollar figures you see, to spin up 20, 30, 40 computers, run a big job, and then we could take it down, right? And it's very affordable for us and allows us to be a player with this type of technology. And then stepping into, like I said, the patient voice is a big thing, right? So as artificial intelligence is a big word, the patient voice, right? We need community advocacy organizations need to get it. Drug companies are looking to get it. FDA requires it. Maria was just at a conference this week where a rep from a pharmaceutical company was giving a talk, and they're like, we need the patient voice, right? We can't get the patient voice, but we're supposed to get it. We got to get it. We just don't know how to get it. And then my wife just poof, magically appears like a leprechaun behind him, like, hey, let me help you. So I can't think of a better medium than social media where you're going to get high volume, authentic community voice. We like to call it community voice because we think there's more power in the community than just one or two voices, right? You're going to get high volume, right? We started working with the Gout Support Group of America a year ago to a month, right? It's been a year, right? We've been a year. We started working with the Facebook group. We had about 1,100 or so statements in the first month. Now, their group's been around, but this is our initial partnership. Let's fast forward to today. We have over 42,000 statements we've been able to preserve in 1 year with this group, just one group, this and their group, right, that we can analyze, we can slice up, we can go back, we can see if this narrative's changing. Is this urgent care thing going down, right, with this data? Month over month, they produce about 4,000 to 5,000 statements in this group, right, that I said we're able to preserve and analyze. It will not be lost in these insights. And some of these stories that are being shared, right, are not going to be lost. And they're going to be used to help, like I said, like new people coming in to help educate, right, and tell them, hey, it's going to be okay. And that's extremely powerful. I want to stop there for a second. I want to go and pause and go into one area I think that plagues, artificial intelligence, right? And that's the overpromise of what it can do. I think we've seen this a lot where industry, especially big industry, is kind of like overpromising and unable to deliver, and that kind of makes it scary, right? I don't know if we can use it, right? We've seen this with like autonomous driving. I think if 10 years ago, we probably would have thought our robot cars would be driving us to this meeting today, right? Because of the promise of what autonomous driving might be able to do for us. But the problem is hard. It's very complex. Now, we made some strides, like there's making some progress. We probably won't be being driven in our cars to this conference next year. We'll still have to, have a human drive us. There's also, like let's take Facebook. We use Facebook a lot, right? Let's use an example from Facebook. Last presidential election, I'm not sure what their algorithm to serve information to users was either supposed to empower us or just flat out enrage us with what we were getting in our feeds. And lastly, I just want to touch on like Zillow, right? Zillow trying to use their iBuying algorithm, right? Due to macro environment changes that the algorithm wasn't ready for due to COVID, the algorithm just wound up spitting out completely inaccurate information, and Zillow ultimately had to pull that project, lay off a third of their company, and their stock went down 50% because of this over-reliance on what they thought AI can do for them. So that's why I really like this blend of what we do with these accelerators and the work that you're seeing that's being introduced from these accelerators, because it's taking AI, right? We're using it, but we're using it in a way that's blending it with human beings, right? We have our, advocacy organizations, patients, caregivers, clinicians, right? We have our pharmaceutical companies that are participating in this. And we can use that to help us inform. And we can use that to also responsibly, ethically, and confidently start to enhance that and maybe roll that into other applications where we might find, hey, this is a task that's going to benefit us. And we have that confidence in what it's producing and giving to us. That's why I feel these accelerators have been a great experience of how we can apply this, but then keep moving the needle forward. We've done about 10 accelerators this year. Obviously, we've done a lot of work. We elaborated a lot of work on the gout, and so I hope that illustrates the power of it. Now I want to introduce, so we can get into it, Max Fleury. He's our data scientist at Trend. He's got a PhD from Temple University. We were very fortunate to pluck him out of academia to have him help us do this work, And so I'm going to hand it over to Max so we can get ready to hear the next panel discussion. But thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. So joining me here today are three community leaders who each bring a unique perspective to mental health and rheumatic diseases. So before we get started, why don't the three of you introduce yourselves? We'll start with you, Vanessa.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Zinke. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I am a co-founder and psychotherapist at Reaching Resilience Therapy. I'm trained as a medical social worker, so had the joy working in a hospital for several years in oncology and also the neonatal ICU. So I interacted with a lot of individuals and caregivers with rare and chronic diseases. So now I'm providing consulting services to a lot of nonprofits, one being Hope for HIE and another Give an Hour, to expand their support programming and also to ensure they're delivering trauma-informed services as well. So very honored to be a part of this space, bring mental health awareness, and also provide support to those living with chronic and rare conditions.
Hi everyone, my name is Nicole Hemingway and I am the CEO of the US Pain Foundation, and we are dedicated to improving the lives of people that live with chronic conditions and serious injuries that cause pain. And as you can imagine, nearly every disease has a pain component, which is why we are part of this conversation today. And what we do is we provide free programs and services around support, around advocacy efforts, around patient education, and helping people find their voices, redefine a new life, find pain management treatments and strategies that are going to help them, and really be there along their journey so they don't have to feel so alone.
Hello everyone, my name is Christy McCaffrey and I am the founder and director of a nonprofit called Project Scleroderma. I created this organization after losing my own mom to a disease called scleroderma. It's a rare autoimmune condition that causes a hardening of the connective tissue. It can also be very painful. And basically what we do is we create documentary films and videos to raise awareness for the disease. We tell patients' stories and we use those videos as a vehicle for awareness and ultimately to educate and inspire support of research. So I am here today to share with you my experience with the patient community, spending time with the patients and their family, learning more about just how heavy the burden of mental health can be, that component of dealing with a rare autoimmune disease like scleroderma.
Thank you. So now that we have a little bit of understanding of a bit of our machine learning and analytical approaches, what we can do is actually go through the results of our mental health analysis that we conducted over the last few months. And as I go through this, I'll stop at a few points and I'll ask questions to our panel here to see how some of those results align with their experiences working and seeing patients. So here's the first piece. So what we see here are 6 different groups, 6 different social media groups. Some of these groups come from Facebook. We see on the top left a group for Fabry disease, And then moving through, anytime you see that R dash or that's related to a subreddit. So R gout, R scleroderma, R Sjogren's, R lupus, and then 2 groups for myasthenia gravis. So all of the analysis here comes from social media. So Facebook, and for anyone that doesn't know, Reddit is organized much the same way, where you have posts and comments, but subreddit calls it submissions and replies. So point being, you have a lot of text data and a lot of conversations that people are having. And for each of these groups, the name of the group dictates, the topic for the things that people will be talking about. If you want to talk about scleroderma or whatever it might be on Reddit or Facebook, you go to that group, and that's the topic of conversation. So what we have here is our first piece. The first thing that we did was run our data through our mental health classifier. So the first thing we want to do is pull out all of those posts and comments that have anything to do with mental health, so we can try and understand what people are talking about when they're talking about mental health as it relates to rheumatic diseases. So that's what we see here. This is our first step to show the size or the amount of data we have for each of these groups. So for example, we see from the Facebook group for Fabry's, a little under 10% of that data related to mental health. And moving on through, we can see the sizes of each group, where we see with the 2 myasthenia gravis groups, more than 25% of all of those posts and comments had something to do with mental health. And then we also see the totals, which gives everyone an idea for the total number of posts and comments that we had to evaluate for each group. So my first question is for you, Christy. So from our analysis, we saw about 16% of all conversations for our scleroderma users discuss mental health. So in speaking with the scleroderma patient population, during your interviews, what would you say are the greatest challenges they face in terms of mental health while trying to manage the disease?
So I would say, and I believe that, our 2 great speakers before us mentioned this, that anxiety is a major component, and everybody in that video also mentioned anxiety. Every single person said anxiety. And I would say that in speaking with not just the patients, but also the caretakers, the family members, that the number one thing they bring up is when they were met with their diagnosis, they immediately felt anxiety over, what does this mean for the course of my life? What does this mean for my day-to-day life? What does this mean for my job and my family? They're met with so many what-ifs that cause extreme levels of anxiety. But I would say that the majority of mental health conversations I've had are actually around depression. And so it's that initial anxiety then sometimes quickly turns into this downward spiral of depression when they realize how serious the condition is, when they realize that, for patients living with scleroderma, there's a wide range of symptoms and scenarios that can play out for them. Some could be not as intense, some could be incredibly intense, but that unknown, the not knowing what's going to happen to them, oftentimes causes them to spiral into depression. And some patients will tell me, I was depressed for several months, but my family and my friends helped me move forward, or I sought help through a support group, and the support group helped me, lessen that burden, or I saw a therapist. Most patients will eventually find their own way to help, but I think that they struggle often for a while, sometimes even just like through their diagnosis journey, as you mentioned with gout, that just what that can do to your mental health, not knowing what you have and trying to find your way to the right answers can be a really heavy burden.
Thank you. So relating to anxiety and depression here, we can start to see how that bubbles up. So what we have here is we have the unique ability, because we're using Reddit data, where everyone has a username that's anonymized. What we have the ability to do is see what subreddits they're using aside from the one we're analyzing. So what we see on the right here, we see scleroderma, Sjogren's, lupus, and gout. So that's in reference to the subreddit for that group. And then what we have on our x-axis here, moving across from Ask Docs all the way to supplements, those are other subreddits. And then on the y-axis, we have the percent of users. So for example, if we take a look at scleroderma, we can see, and also for Sjogren's, more than 20% of users from each of those groups are also on the Ask Docs subreddit. So what we see, these are the subreddits that were these 4 groups had in common, where we had users that were also contributing to other subreddits. So while we haven't really analyzed anything in particular yet, we already have some information related to mental health at this level, where we see the second most common subreddit amongst these users was the subreddit for anxiety. We also see depression, mental health, suicide watch, and MedDizzy, and health anxiety. So there's a lot of mental health already at this level, just seeing not what they're talking about, but just where they're going to have discussions. So, more questions for you. This time, also for Christy. So we see reference to 2 subreddits, anxiety and depression, and you already mentioned depression, which are dedicated to mental health discussion. What type of mental health symptoms would you say patients express dealing with most regularly?
So, like, just to piggyback off of what I was just saying, depression really is the topic that comes up the most. And, you know, it seems to be a trickle effect, too, from the patient, and what they're experiencing then affects everyone around them, too. And oftentimes the patients will say, you know, I have a supportive family, or I have people here to help me, but they just don't understand what I'm dealing with. That there's this frustration that, you know, they just don't feel like they're being seen and heard. And in a lot of ways, that's what we're trying to do with telling their stories through documentary, through the documentary form, is just allowing them to be seen and heard and validated. I can't tell you how many patients I've had experiences with that when we're done with our 3 to 4 days of filming, I can see a noticeable difference in their energy and their attitude towards their situation. Many patients will say, I just feel completely different because I've been able to, you know, unload my entire story, and you sat there and you compassionately heard me. And now I know that this video is going to be shared with a much larger audience, and in that way I'm going to be seen and heard. So I think that depression is the #1 symptom that I see many patients struggling with, but really the, you know, how we could hopefully help with that is helping the patient community feel more heard in their struggle.
So now we have really what I would consider one of the first phases of our analysis. So what the first step, like I said, was we extracted out those posts and comments that had anything to do with mental health across different groups. So after we extract out those posts and comments, what we want to try and determine are what are the popular topics that people are talking about in these groups when they're talking about mental health. So the way that we do that, without getting too into the weeds on the natural language processing aspects of that, basically what we can do is look at words, see what words are occurring often together, and see what words tend to cluster together. And from that, we can assign topics to the kinds of words that are occurring together. So basically, from that, what we have are the most common topics for these groups. We can see they generally fit into 3 kinds of topics: things relating to management or treatment, things related to burden or symptoms, or sort of general impacts that might not fit into one of the 2 other bins. The size of the bar indicates the number of users in that group. So the larger the bar, the more users from these subreddits or Facebook groups that are talking about this topic. So the largest topic was conversations related to fatigue or insomnia, where we had more than 500 users talking about this. A middle-sized topic was something like anxiety, and a smaller topic was something like libido, where we had just under 50 users talking about it. And you can look around and see the different topics that individuals tended to talk about. When you look toward management or treatment, you see, you don't actually see specific reference to specific medications, because we're looking at these conditions, we're looking across conditions. So what you find is more general use management kinds of things, where you see reference to THC and marijuana, discussion around diet, exercise, meditation, therapy. So these kind of general use kinds of things. So the next question is for you, Vanessa. So we see a variety of management or coping techniques identified as mental health topics in our analysis, like meditation, pets, and therapy. So could you talk about what coping tools are most helpful for individuals living with chronic illnesses?
Yeah. So I'd say #1 is definitely mindfulness, you know, grounding yourself in the present, because as Christy mentioned too, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of what if, a lot of unknowns. So, I think in general, we come from a framework of distress of, I just got to make it through this week and then I'll be better, right? If I just didn't have pain, I'll be better. But reframing that of how present am I right now? What's going to bring me joy? How can I make my life more meaningful instead of focusing more on the distress? Because distress is always going to exist, right? Whether chronic condition or not. So I think, mindfulness can be a lot of things. We think a lot of times of like meditation. That could be it, of course. That could be part of it. But again, kind of reframing our lives of, what brings me joy? What makes meaning for me? And that's part of the acceptance of understanding that, yes, this is my new life now. And it's very different than what I expected. But how can I be present in this moment? Even though my pain is a 8 out of 10, what can I do? What can I control, right? Because a lot of things are out of our control. So I think that's extremely powerful. I think grounding techniques, right? As we talked about anxiety, how can I come back to my body? And then connection, who else is like me? Who understands my experience, right? It's so isolating, and you can spiral in that. So how can I get connected to others who really understand this experience? And how can I foster that?
All right, so in addition to coping techniques and management kinds of things, another thing that we saw here was specific reference to mental health symptoms like anxiety and stress. But one thing we haven't really talked much about yet is grief. So what role does grief play in the experience individuals have when diagnosed with chronic conditions?
I could talk about grief for days. I love grief. When we think of grief, we think of, death, something tangible, something physical. But when working in chronic illness or rare diseases, it's much more than that, right? You're grieving what you thought your life would be like, and you're constantly grieving and adjusting as things unfold. As Gary talked about, right, going years and years. First, oh yay, I don't have gout, and then, okay, I do have gout. What does my life look like that? So, there's constant losses that you're experiencing as you're, trying to find an answer. And then you do find an answer, but there's all these outcomes, and my life, who knows what that's gonna look like. It's a lot of wait and see, and then we'll treat as it comes. So I think it starts by just acknowledging that exists, and we have to move through it. Like Dr. Parker said, that's the only way we can move forward is going through it, feeling the feelings, acknowledging that this exists, and that it sucks. And it's unfair, and it's out of your control. And then guilt comes along with that, right? Grief and guilt go hand in hand. I shouldn't be feeling bad. I shouldn't be grieving. It's not that bad. It could be worse. Or if you're a caregiver, well, it's not happening to me. It's my child. I shouldn't feel guilty. So again, it's all starting off of a place of giving yourself compassion and kindness, and know that you are grieving, and there's a lot that you're losing. And how can I process that? How can I create a relationship with my grief instead of pushing it away and not wanting to deal with it? But how can I hold it next to me? And it's heavy, but it's here. And I want to move forward, and I want to make meaning, and I want to create joy in my life still with it here with me.
Thank you. So moving from grief on to other areas of burden and symptoms, my next question is for you, Nicole. So we have a few topics here with reference to pain and discomfort, where we see reference to migraines and flares. So in talking about pain and mental health, a U.S. Pain Foundation nationwide survey aimed to better understand the health crisis of chronic pain, and the results indicated a devastating impact of chronic pain on quality of life. Can you touch more on those results?
Yes. So earlier this year, we conducted a comprehensive survey to really better understand our community and the impact of chronic pain on individuals' lives, what chronic pain is doing and the crisis that is around it. Areas that we explored were the types of pain that people are living with, mental health, the patient-provider relationship, and their ability to work, and so many other areas. We had 2,275 individuals that live with pain respond. And a few of the key takeaways that I think are really important and relevant to this conversation. The first is that 95% of respondents live with at least one comorbid condition. 30%, though, live with 6 to 10 different comorbidities. And so that's just talking about the complexity of treating individuals and their health outcomes. kind of touching on what Christy said earlier, and even especially what Gary had said too, looking at their ability to participate in everyday lives. 99% said that they were restricted from being able to socialize, to participating in hobbies, to being able to work, to being able to sleep, to be able to go out with their friends. A few other ones sort of now when we look at the mental health, 79% felt stigmatized by their condition and their pain. Similar to the same data points that were brought up earlier from the Alliance for Gout Awareness and from Trend, nearly 60% of folks said that they experienced depression-like or anxiety-like symptoms daily or multiple times a week. Yet, when we asked a follow-up question about how many of these folks have conversations with their healthcare professionals, 38% of them said that their healthcare professional has never asked them about their mental health. And so I think these are some serious areas that we really need to address, and we need to look at that biopsychosocial component and make sure that we are really treating the whole individual so that we have better health outcomes going forward.
Thank you. So related to that, so our mental health analysis showed a number of common mental health impacts across diseases. And one thing that we see when we look at the blue impacts is we see reference to things related to daily living in terms of relationships, disability and laws, accommodations, and work and career. So Nicole, what are things you hear from patients every day that would add additional context to our conversations this afternoon? And what are you trying to accomplish with your efforts?
Well, every single day we hear from individuals who are desperate for care, who are looking for proper diagnoses, for access to their treatments, to finding a sense of community. People are being dismissed, they are being marginalized, they are being judged, they are isolated and alone. They are dealing with, as you said, grief and tremendous loss and anger. They're completely stigmatized. And I think that these are all areas that we really need to look at. Going back to our survey, only 18% of respondents are actually able to work full time. So they are severely disabled by their pain. They are cut off from so many different things. They are losing their homes, their families. They can't find providers that are able to help them along their journeys. More than 71% of them said that they are disabled also by their pain in our survey. So I think that that just kind of highlights some of those larger numbers and hopefully will allow people to kind of look at it from a different perspective. There is so much that we need to do to help these folks feel heard, validated, and find the right treatments and the right courses. So some of the things that we are really focused on is providing support groups for individuals, for providing valuable information and patient education, for being a connector to other organizations and nonprofits that are doing great work. As I said earlier, pain is a component of so many diseases, and that is what we are really trying to help, is raising that voice, bringing everybody to the table, but also being able to direct people to the right sources and the right spots. And then looking at advocacy and awareness and ways that we can elevate this discussion, make sure that we are removing those barriers and stigmas that individuals are going through. And hopefully people will be able to start finding the treatments that they want. Nobody should have to go through what Gary went through, 16 years undiagnosed. This is such a very personal matter to me. I have lived with pain since I was an early child, and I don't want people to have to go through that. So we are here really just to provide those resources and support.
Thank you. So one other thing that we wanted to do was, while we had an understanding of what the most frequent topics were between the groups when we look at all of them together, we also can appreciate that these are different diseases. So we want to have some understanding of how these topics tend to differ between different diseases. So what we did was we looked at the 3 largest disease groups that we had based on the amount of data, which included lupus, gout, and Sjogren's. So what we have here are those same topics from our topic wheel that we were just looking at, but what we have is the percent of users in each of those topics. We see the percent of users on the x-axis. On the y-axis, that's where we see the topic. So what we can see here is, while there's some amount of users in each of these topics, some of these topics tend to be more focused on specific diseases. So for example, if we look at something like the most frequent topic, which was fatigue and insomnia, we see the lupus and Sjogren's groups were largest, whereas a little bit smaller number of users or percent of users for gout. And on the flip side of that, we see a topic like alcohol, where we see a lot more discussion with the gout community. And we can see the same thing when we look through, where more dominant topics, for example, like Sjogren's, libido was a topic that was most common for that group. So what we see here is we can appreciate these differences between the different diseases that we're looking at here, while they share these topics as they relate to mental health. So Christy, we saw a wide range of topics in the data that were shared between populations. How would you say the rheumatic disease patient population could be better served overall when it comes to their mental health?
So I think we've heard this discussed throughout everything we've talked about today, just about being able to meet the patient where they're at, whether it be initially when they're diagnosed or wherever they're at on their journey. It's terrible that for Gary it took 16 years to get that diagnosis, but to Gary's point, the importance of empathy when you finally do get that diagnosis, and then when you're starting out on this really scary journey is what it is for each patient. I would say that the number one thing I have found on the other side of the camera when I'm interviewing these patients is how much you can actually alleviate someone's emotional pain just by being a compassionate listener, by being willing to sit there and actively listen to this heavy weight that they're carrying, or meeting them at their, whatever your interaction is with them, at their appointment or whatever. It's being able to say, please tell me how your mental health is right now. Tell me what it is that you're dealing with, and then actively, compassionately listen and show up with empathy. I think it goes a long way.
Thanks. So one of the last pieces of data that I want to show everyone here is this is something we've been developing lately, where we're actually trying to develop user personas for individuals that sort of shows a natural history or journey for patients. So what happens is with our analysis a lot of times is what we're interested in is getting a lot of people's perspectives. And in that process, there's certain individuals that tend to talk a lot more and contribute a lot more posts and comments to these subreddits. So what happens is we actually have to take them out because they're talking more than the average person is, and we want to have a lot of different voices, like I said. But there's still a lot of value in those individuals that tend to talk a lot, because what we have from these individuals is a lot of data over a long amount of time, and we can really start to understand individual patient journeys when we put this all together. And that's what we have here. So this is an individual who we've given the alias John, who we can see their journey just from Reddit from 2014 to 2023. And what we see are excerpts from different posts and comments that they contributed, and what we also see are the subreddits that they're contributing to. And that's what we see with the dots on the right here. So what we find is when we just look at the colored dots, we can see these clusters, and we can already understand what they're contributing to in terms of the subreddits. So for example, if we look at 2020, where their activity really increases, we see a lot of orange. So the question is, well, what was going on in 2020, in around March 2020? Well, we see they're contributing a lot to COVID-19 positive. What we also see is when we look at 6/2017, we see this individual who is diagnosed with Sjogren's. We actually see that they said they were finally diagnosed with Sjogren's disease. But what we have is 4 years of data before they were diagnosed. So we understand their journey before they actually receive a formal diagnosis, and we can actually see other diagnoses that they have along that journey, where we see things where they have a GERD diagnosis. Like I said, we see when they were actually diagnosed with Sjogren's, and we really get an idea for their journey across time. So my question now is for Nicole. We know that the U.S. Pain Foundation has a program focused on support, and the trend data shows pain is related to mental health outcomes, with about 15% of all mental health conversations mentioning pain. Can you share more about the support efforts to shine a light on mental health and pain?
Yes, so the U.S. Pain Foundation has a clinical social worker who has developed a comprehensive training program that all of our facilitators go through. And it teaches them how to lead an effective support group, what are some of the conversations and the topics to talk about in them. We have a weekly national meeting. They're all held through Zoom that people can attend. We have state-based location groups that also occur every single month in almost 20 different states. And then we have about 15 specialized groups for individuals such as care partners, caregivers for teenagers. We have a writing room, we have a BIPOC community group, an LGBTQ plus group. The whole thing is having a safe place for people to go. These individuals, they have been robbed of so much. They just want to attend a soccer game and see their grandkid kick a goal, or they want to make a meal for their family. And so for them to have a safe place where they can come and share what they're going through, on top of living with the frustrations and the grief that comes with living with a chronic illness and living with pain, we're hoping that we can be that branch to help them along their journeys and really help them along the mental health approach, because we need to look at that intersection between pain and mental health, and we need to start addressing it further.
Thanks, Nicole. So my last question now is for Vanessa. So some of the most frequent subreddits for these chronic conditions included mental health threads like anxiety and depression, which we saw before. So this is consistent with the work we did together with Given Hour mapping the caregiver mental health journey earlier this year. Can you speak to what you learned from that and tell us how providers can be sensitive to mental health and trauma when working with those diagnosed with chronic diseases?
Yeah, so in my private practice, usually I'll get to know the individual coming seeking therapy, and I'll say, what brought you here? And a lot of times those with a chronic condition will say, well, my doctor said it's anxiety. That's why I'm feeling the way I am, which is obviously difficult to hear. And so I think one thing is just acknowledging that they're connected. Usually your anxiety is probably impacting your chronic condition, and vice versa, your chronic condition is exacerbating your anxiety. So I think one, just acknowledging that it's that. And of course, yes, they should manage their anxiety and find support for that as well. But it's just how you're approaching it, right? That these things go together. And then the second thing is just offering as much control and agency as you possibly can, because obviously with chronic conditions, you're out of control. There's things you can't control on your own. So what can we do? Simple as, what do you want to talk about today? We have how many minutes together, what's important for us to cover today? Because we have agendas as providers that we want to get through, and we have a list of patients we want to see. So giving that control back to that person, what would be helpful for you today? And then also just acknowledging that there's multiple identities in someone, right? We want to be holistic in our treatment, whether that's physical, emotional, spiritual, but also where is this person coming from? What is their race? What is their generational trauma? What is their gender, their sexual orientation? And how does that all come into the picture of wellness in general, whether it's physical or mental? So, and that's all part of the human experience, right? Just getting to know people, not just by their diagnosis. And then lastly, what's your why? I think it's important to always reflect on why you're in this field, why it's important to you. Obviously, our system is overwhelmed, and it can be easy to be exhausted and to feel that anxiety when you're working with someone who's also frustrated and anxious. And that cycle can just continue, right? And then that conversation or that visit isn't as productive as it can be. So just acknowledging that, right? That I'm also experiencing vicarious trauma and secondary trauma and in a very difficult system. And so how am I showing up the best for people? And how can I be better? And what can I do to focus on myself as well to make sure that I am being the best I can for these people? So a few things. But I think in general, we just want to treat everyone as if they've experienced trauma, right? Whether it's based on medical trauma or trauma that they've experienced in their childhood, but coming from a framework of there's trauma all around us, and everyone to this day in a pandemic is experiencing chronic trauma. So how can I come and treat people with kindness, treat myself with kindness and compassion to have the best outcomes that way?
All right, thanks, Vanessa. So now we can open it up to questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the panel, for Dr. Parker, for Gary? Yeah.
Wonder how to film somebody's story. And like you were saying, how they just really wanted to be heard. That alone was, you really found to be salubrious, meaning healthful. Like they just felt so much better.
It's cathartic.
Thank you, cathartic. Good deal.
Yeah.
So you really noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say after 10 years of doing this, I all along have been searching for, like, what is it that we're really giving the patient here in this experience? Obviously, for awareness's sake, we're doing something, but what are we giving the patient? And after the past 10 years, I can say, absolutely, we're giving them a cathartic experience that every single one of them has said has been a life-changing experience. And it's not some magical thing that I or my team is doing. It's truly just showing up and asking all these questions about not just about your story, your diagnosis, and everything that on paper you've been through. What did it feel like? How has it changed you? How has it changed your perspective of the world? How has it changed your perspective of your life experience? It's a positive shift in them to just feel like they're being seen and heard and validated. And then to be able to share it, you know, and know that other people are hearing them even just beyond that is pretty powerful for them.
So is there a desire, when you're done, often to get a copy of the finished product and share with people they know, or to have it shared to people they don't know? Or both?
Both, I think. I'd say both. I think the people that ultimately we film with have decided that they do want it to go further, and that takes a lot of courage. You know, I commend every single person we've ever worked with for having the courage to do that, but I also think, like I said, it opens up something in them where a lot of patients afterwards would say, you know, I wasn't really interested in being an advocate, but now I feel like I am, because you've given them that confidence to educate others about what it is that they're going through. And just to speak to the compassionate side of things that we were talking about, you know, it's hard to sit there and listen to somebody pour their heart out and not want to interrupt them or make it better or talk over them to say, you know, well, let's fix it. That's a piece of it too, is like actually listening and letting them unload what, you know, in the time that you have. I know sometimes probably people, as a physician, people will probably talk more than you have time for. But, you know, yeah, just being able to be mindful of the fact that they do need to know that you care about what they're going through and not just, let's look at the facts and what's here on paper. Like, how do you feel about what you're experiencing?
Thank you.
Can we get a microphone over here? While that's making its way across the hall, I just wanted to say, you know, we've covered a lot of ground today, but I want to thank everyone on the panel and Dr. Parker and Gary. You know, it's about listening and it's about, you know, sharing our stories and raising awareness, but also, you know, coming up with solutions. And that's what I'm hearing a lot of today is people who are finding creative ways to solve some really difficult challenges. So I just want to thank all of you for that. Sonia?
Yeah, I just had a question for Vanessa. So when you're working with, you know, maybe within the hospital setting, are you seeing a connection when you see the mental health of either a caregiver or a caretaker, you know, with the patient? Do you see any connection, like the mental health for the patient as well as the caregiver when you see, can you kind of just?
Yeah, that's a great question. 100%, yeah. And as little as infancy, right? You know, I worked in the NICU for several years. And of course that does, right? We're thinking a lot about attachment and bonding, and when your child has a rare disease or a chronic condition, how can you do that, right? You have medical equipment, you have things around that impede on that. Of course it happens over a period of time, which I remind people, right? It's not an instant, like, doing skin to skin, right, when your child's born. It's over a long period of time, but of course that has huge impacts on our mental health and our relationship with our child. And also, right, if they're siblings too, and what that relationship looks like, and the attention that they're receiving as well. So it impacts the whole system, like, you know, we've talked about already, and just how that trickles down to every single person. And with intervention, right, that helps a lot, you know, whether that's through therapy or developmental therapies or just social connection or peer support. I think, you know, of course it's on everyone's minds, and the what if, you know, we can sit there and think all the time, well, maybe if I just did this, or if this didn't happen, my relationship would look this way. So yes, huge impacts on the family system, both the patient and also, you know, the caregiver as well. So I think that's why one, connection and connecting with other families who are going through things like you, and also those other interventions are so important to foster that relationship and get it to what you hoped it would be.
We have another question over here.
Hi. So mental health awareness and advocacy is something that I'm and the agency I work for are very passionate about, and I've been pretty steeped in some research. So with depression and anxiety, a lot of the common discussions are around people feeling like they're in a black hole or a dark place, and they're at the bottom, and every time they try to climb up, and just as they're about to hoist themselves over, they feel like they're kicked back down again. And these feelings are just constant. And I know this is something, what I'm about to say, it's something I'm personally guilty of too, but society conditions us when somebody says, how are you? How are things? You say, good, or pretty good, even if they're really awful. And I know my mom, for example, it was one of the eye-opener things for me. I remember, like, she was having a horrible week. Her fibromyalgia was acting up. She has bronchiectasis. She has diabetes. She was dealing with personal stuff going on in our family. And I was out with her and at a doctor's appointment. And the doctor's like, how are things? And she's like, oh, good. They're good. So I guess my question for all of you is there anything that you guys are doing or that can be done to kind of push the, and I'm wording this probably a little incorrectly, but like push the truth out of people? Like, what is our role, or what is the physician's role in actually making sure that when their patients say, I'm good, that they actually are good and they aren't just saying that?
Somebody
I
want
think that would be towards you. That's a great question. You know, I think, especially providers, and if like you're an outpatient, you probably don't have a social worker, you don't have a mental health provider, like easy on access for you. So I think a lot of the times it's, and not that it's completely conscious either, it's just like, well, if I do ask and they say bad, or they say they're suicidal, like what do I do next, right? What resources do I have? Because one, we know mental health resources are limited, first of all. There's not easy access to them either. So I think partly it's that, like, you know, am I asking it, and then what happens next? What's the next step? Do I have a resource? Do I have something immediate, right? So I think, you know, it obviously takes time, and it takes things like this and other awareness for people to start feeling comfortable with the questions, and just asking it, right? You know, I think we try hard to implement screening programs, which is a great start, right? To screen someone for depression or anxiety or suicidal ideation. But a lot of times that's just a piece of paper that gets lost, or you fill it out and you're honest and you're like, great, I'm gonna give it to my doctor, and then it doesn't get addressed, right? So I think it starts with things like that, but also just getting comfortable with the questions. And yes, I think it's natural to say, how are you? And someone will say good, but no, tell me how you really are. You know, what has your week been like? And then yeah, they may say something that you're like, okay, what do I do next? Or what question, you know, of course, we have anxiety related to mental health and suicidal ideation, and like, well, you know, what questions do I ask next? What do I do? And you won't always have the perfect answer, but of course there's resources out there, whether it's calling 988 or using a hotline or whatever it may be to help someone in that immediate, to, you know, if there is an immediate safety concern. But overall, it's just opening up the conversation because we want to build that trust with our patients, so that, you know, if that does come up, they know who to ask. And then finding, you know, resources. There's so many places now that are focusing on rare diseases and focusing on chronic conditions like we've all seen today, and starting to do the work. So again, just getting comfortable, and they may not be the perfect language, it may not have the best thing to say back, but just starting the conversation.
Thank you. Great question. And somebody alluded to it earlier that it's all relative also. We're all living in these communities where people are sharing their stories, and sometimes we feel like we have it pretty good compared to, you know, our neighbor or, you know, someone else in the community. So sometimes I think we don't even know how we're doing, right? So it's a great question. I know that Dr. Parker needs to get to the airport, and we've all been hanging out for a while here. In a moment, those doors are going to open up, and we have some cocktails and some food. I hope you all stay, continue the conversation. I wanted to just give Daniel Martinez a minute to give some closing remarks from Horizon. But thank you all. I hope you've learned something today that you'll bring back to your jobs or to your work in advocacy. And again, thank you.
All right, well, my name is Daniel Martinez. I'm with Horizon Therapeutics, and we're one of the partners working with Trend Community. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much to our panel, both of our panels, and our patients and our advocates for participating this afternoon. I think we can all agree that we're living in a weird time with social media, right? And it's so refreshing to see the positive outcomes and the positive feedback and community engagement that we're seeing from these groups. So I'm very thankful for the Trend team really helping us get this data, because I know that it's going to be very beneficial for what we're trying to accomplish for all of these communities that we work together for.